All right. How are you, class? Today we are going to be talking about personnel and facilities management. And the reason I'm combining two such big issues is that this is going to be my plug to say that if you really want to learn more about these things, you're going to probably need to consider taking SLIS 704 while you are here. Personnel in particular, there's just so much going on with the personnel issue, and so I do not believe that your book really gives it justice, but I don't think any book can really give it justice when we're talking about something as big of an issue as personnel management, and then that in this course is just being conveniently fit into a management module with a lot of other management topics, and that is just one piece of a module within a whole semester long, summer long class. So what you really need for personnel management is probably to spend 1 to 3 weeks talking about it within a management course. And when I taught management in the past, that's what I did. But there's so many things that you have to account for. You have to account for compliance with federal acts. You have to talk about the hiring process. You have to talk about disciplining and performance appraisals. And you have to talk about scheduling. And you have to talk about professional development and training, staff trainings. You have to talk about communication and recognizing the strengths and amplifying the strengths of certain employees, while also identifying the weaknesses of employees and making sure that they are not hindered and your institution is not hindered by those weaknesses, whether that means accounting for those weaknesses by offsetting them or trying to help those employees overcome those weaknesses. So there are a lot of things that go on in the realm of personnel management, and we do not have adequate time or space to really deal with that. So if you want to learn more about that, I really suggest you take 704, and there's a limit to how much I can really talk about that, because there are other things that we need to talk about and address. So really what I'm going to say right now for personnel management is read what's in your book. If you want to learn more about recruitment and retention specifically, I would suggest doing a literature search within one of the library databases and learning more about that, because there is a lot of literature that is out there. I also just wanted to briefly talk about the microaggressions piece. Please, I'm sort of a diversity advocate within the field, and my dissertation talks about diversity, and microaggressions is one of the things that I deal with in my dissertation research. So it would be, there's actually a Twitter account you can follow called LIS Microaggressions, and I'm sure there are other things within social media that talk about LIS microaggressions. So you get mention of that in your book, and I suggest that maybe you want to bone up a little bit about that too. If you don't know what that term is, it's a good time to learn what that term is and how that can affect traditionally disenfranchised groups within your library. So that's really what I'm going to talk about right now as far as personnel management. I would just hope that it's very important that people have management skills, and so I'm going to hope that you guys consider taking 704, but that also means that I've got to hope that it will be offered while you are here at SLIS. Now let's talk about facilities management, because facilities management, even though it's really just as complicated a subject, it is something that I can sort of give you that little, I guess 15-minute speech about. And so one thing that I want to first talk about is that the library, as you guys know, it has really evolved in the last 25 years. We've evolved in the types of services that we do, the variety of materials that we offer. Programs are getting a little more creative and flexible, and then also we are, of course, providing the technology, internet resources, and that sort of thing, things that we didn't do when I was young. And we've got people in this class that are as young as 23 years old. So some of you probably don't even remember the pre-internet days, but I remember them very well, and I remember going to libraries before the internet was an actual thing. And libraries have evolved a lot since that time, and facilities maintenance as an issue has also evolved in that same vein. Now, there are a lot of different responsibilities that come under the whole facilities management thing. You have such things as monitoring safety, monitoring sanitation within your library, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, electrical systems, grounds, roof maintenance, disaster preparedness, and then of course your equipment, and you do want to be compliant with the American Disabilities Act. So those are some of the things that you're going to have to keep in mind as you're looking at facilities and reviewing facilities and that sort of thing. And so really what you're going to need is a facilities plan, and you're probably going to want that facilities plan to actually be written out and easily accessible to your employees. Ideally, I think if we live in a utopia, you've also got your employees sort of reviewing it from time to time, and you have maybe when you hire new employees, you introduce them to your facilities plan and facilities maintenance and everything. But when you're in day-to-day practice, things can get lost in the shuffle, and because of that, we don't really have the time to review and update our facilities plan as much as we'd like to. And then there are so many things that you have to introduce your new employees to, that introducing them to facilities is just like, I've got to teach you how to do your job first, and I've got to make sure that you don't weird other people out on the job and things like that. So facilities unfortunately gets this sort of, it sort of gets put on the back burner at times when it shouldn't, especially as far as disseminating that knowledge to the rest of your employees. A lot of times you'll have like your administration and they've got facilities down pat, but then when you get to your rank and file employees, then they're not as quote unquote on it as the administration are, or as on it as they could be. And an example of that, I like to give real world examples. I like to talk about libraries and hear what other people say about their library experiences. So one real world example I can give of that is when I was working at a public library in Winston-Salem. We had this guy, he was a regular patron, and he came in and he was having his lunch just in the middle of the research area, and he was smacking and chowing down and just really being nasty. He was the type of person that you didn't want to eat with around that time. You know what I'm saying? He would gross you out if you were at the table with him. Now, having said that, I told him that he couldn't eat there, and I told him that he would have to go somewhere else. This guy was not the type that would just back down. So when I told him that, he looked for a sign on our department floor, and he found it, and then he said, well, this says you can't eat here, but I don't see any sign that says you can't eat anywhere else in the library. So then he goes to another department, asks them if it's okay for him to eat wherever he was eating. They didn't know what went on in our departments. They said sure. So he came back saying that he heard from someone else in another department that he could eat there, and I told him, okay, do you want to speak to my supervisor? He said no. He actually went to the library director to try to complain on me. So when he did that, that's when my library director told me, as well as him, and hopefully people in that other department, but told me and him that, okay, here's this area of the library, and there is one particular area of that library where you are allowed to eat. And it says this is the only place in the library where you're allowed to eat. There's a little sign. But I didn't know that because I didn't have the facilities knowledge that I really should have had. I just knew we couldn't eat in my area. But then someone else in another department who told him wrong, that person also did not know what he could or could not do in the library, because we hadn't been told that, hey, that was the only place in the library where people are allowed to eat. I know that's a long story, but that just is one example of demonstrating how important it is to let the information about facilities get disseminated throughout and to all of your employees, to your security, to your maintenance staff, who definitely we hope are going to know about it and that sort of thing. Now, when we talk about standards as far as maintenance and upkeep of facilities, these standards really do need to be identified, documented, and clearly expressed so that everyone has the same expectations for one another. Now, that, especially with your custodial staff, your janitorial staff, you need to tell them what your expectations are. And generally, if you do that, then those expectations, as long as they're not unreasonable, will be followed through. But if people don't know what the expectations are for cleanliness and upkeep and sanitation and that sort of thing, you're going to have issues. But it is not just, and I used to be a janitor too, so I'm going to tell you, it's not just the responsibility of the janitors to keep the space clean. Make sure that your employees are washing their dishes, and communicate that to your employees that they need to wash their dishes. Communicate to your employees that stuff that's kept in the break room refrigerator for a long time is going to get tossed to either eat their stuff, or if they don't eat it in a certain amount of time, then get rid of it. You don't want to see that, 6-month-old jug of milk in the staff refrigerator. That's just not cool. So, there are some maintenance things that are day-to-day maintenance things that either your custodial staff is going to handle or your employees are going to handle. And these things need to be really just checked on every day. And some of those things include, making sure for your custodial staff, making sure within the building, by the way, making sure that your drinking fountains are clean, making sure that glass is clean on the doors, making sure that your restrooms are clean, clearing the entryway and making sure that tripping hazards throughout the library are taken care of, because you don't want to get sued because of tripping hazards. You want to dust because dusting shouldn't just be seen as a cosmetic thing. You don't want those allergens to accumulate and everything. You want trash to be emptied. You want lighting to be sufficient. You want carpets to be vacuumed, floors to be swept, and again, you want to make sure that food is just not lingering around the library. That is never good. I would personally recommend, even though we're in such a data-driven discipline, I don't have anything other than anecdotal evidence to suggest that it's probably best that you make a designated area for patrons to eat if patrons want to eat. But I think, based on anecdotal experience, that is the best practice, even though I don't have the data really to back that up. I don't know if such data exists. But I don't think it's a good idea to just have food all over the place in the library, or to allow food all over the place in the library, because then that increases what you're having to constantly check on as far as land area or land mass, in order to make sure that you don't have food that's just lingering around that's attracting pests. Speaking of pests, you are going to want to make sure that you have a pest control plan in place. That also means knowing who you call when you do have a pest issue. A lot of times that will go above the library. For instance, if you work at a college, if you work at an academic library within a college, a lot of times when you do recognize a pest issue, instead of the director actually dealing with that by contracting some sort of pest control person, generally that gets reported to the facilities people that are responsible for the college. And then it's the same way a lot of times with county governments, is that they have certain facilities people, and then your director, when they encounter problems and issues with pests, they consult the county staff and sort of relay the issue, and then it gets taken care of. Most county and city governments that I've encountered, though, do have some sort of people who maintain facilities and deal with situations such as pests. You're going to have seasonal outbreaks of illnesses and things like that, so you want to make sure that you have sanitary stuff within your library. It's probably a good idea to keep Kleenexes when you can. It's probably a good idea to keep sanitizer, hand sanitizer when you can for your patrons. You probably also maybe want to, if you do things like loan out headphones, you probably want to also give patrons things that they can wipe the headphones off with, or you can do it yourself, I guess, just depending on what the library's policy is. Now, as far as exterior maintenance, you are going to have to do things such as, when I say you, I mean you're not necessarily going to have to physically do these things yourself, but you are going to have to make sure that things are taken care of on the outside as well, especially when it comes to debris. People will leave debris and things like that as they're exiting the library, or people who are loitering around the library but not necessarily going in. You're going to need to make sure that plants are properly trimmed and maintained. You don't want shrubs and things like that to be all over the place, for weeds to be everywhere and things of that nature. In times of bad weather, you are going to have to make sure that both if you're expecting bad weather, preventative things are done, and then also once bad weather occurs, you've got to make sure that the area is safe. You're going to have to make sure if there's ice that your patrons are alerted about the presence of that ice, or if they can be redirected to other areas, you're going to need to do that sort of thing. Make sure that there are, trash receptacles and things like that where people can leave their trash, not just inside the library, but outside of the library, and that will take care of some issues. They will use those things, and those are also things that need to be checked on a daily basis. And there are going to be things, when I talk about daily basis, there are going to be certain facilities things that need to be checked on daily, some that need to be checked on weekly, monthly, and seasonally. So, it's also a good idea when you're developing your maintenance plan to figure out what needs to be done every day. For instance, making sure dishes are washed. I'm a stickler for that in a work environment, making sure that that's done every day. But some things such as maybe making sure that, we'll get to them later because I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there are going to be some things that can be done weekly or monthly or seasonally. Now, there are general maintenance concerns that are, that are going to crop up, and these might be some of your more seasonal things that you're going to check on. A lot of these are mechanical, electrical, or plumbing concerns, and they can include checking on boilers, computer equipment, fire alarms, and extinguishers. That's what I was thinking of earlier for one of your seasonal things. Make sure that your fire alarms are working, your fire extinguishers are working. Heating and air units, they need to be checked probably seasonally. Your lighting, just sort of check that. Pest control is another thing that you probably just need to keep some sort of casual, be on the lookout for sort of attitude about. Plumbing, roofing and gutters, sprinkler systems, and then water heaters. You probably want to do, I would say, either a seasonal or yearly, just sort of check on everything that you can possibly think of, and that can either be done at one time a year or one time a season as sort of your overall just checkup on everything, or you can break that down and say, okay, this month we're going to do this, such as, you might have a plan where you say, okay, we're going to clean and repair the windows in July, and then in August we're going to make sure that the parking lot is paved, and we'll resurface as necessary, and then September might be the month that you decide, okay, this will be when we'll do an annual shampooing of the carpets and things like that. So you can have some routines that are, you can have some things that are going to be checked on on a maybe on a yearly or annual basis, but then you can split them up by month. Okay, now when it comes to electricity, so right now what I'm going to get into is energy and environmental systems management. So the first thing that comes up with that is electricity. Electricity is an even bigger concern now than it ever has been, because you're not just looking at lighting, and you're not just looking at making sure that heaters are working and that sort of thing. Now you've got, in today's technological libraries, you've got everything. You've got computers, printers, and networks that need to be looked at. You've got to make sure that your modems are set. You've got to make sure that the Wi-Fi and all the bandwidth and all that stuff is going well. So servers, that sort of thing. So when you look at electrical concerns, you are probably also looking at IT concerns in today's library environment. And so there, again, you're going to want to make a checklist of things that are all of your electrical related concerns, and those will include your IT concerns. Now for HVAC, your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, there's a lot that comes under this. That includes checking air ducts, fans, filters, humidifiers or dehumidifiers, as well as your insulation. You need to check pipes for leakage, and then one thing that kind of gets overlooked is you are going to have to check on your storage areas. Most of the time libraries do have some sort of storage or surplus area, and sometimes those can get neglected, but you don't want those things to get neglected too bad and then find out that the things that you have stored have become damaged. How do they get damaged? I'm glad you asked. Mold is a big deal. So mold is probably your, I don't want to say your number one culprit, because you can have a whole host of culprits when it comes to organisms. So you can have roaches and mice that are making life difficult for you, and then of course you can have people that are making life difficult for you. But I would say mold, that is this particular organism that really kind of gets to me at times. And one thing you're going to need to do is try to maintain a proper level of humidity. Year-round levels of humidity should be around 30 to 40%, and if you need to, then use a dehumidifier in order to take care of some of your humidity issues. Because the thing is, once a material gets molded, it'll be, usually it's no good and just needs to be discarded, and those things can make people sick. Like, people might try to salvage a moldy material, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because that might be, you don't just want to try to clean it cosmetically and put it back, because people can still get sick using that stuff or handling that stuff. People can get very sick dealing with mold. Some molds are actually toxic, so you got to remember that. By the way, mold maintenance, this is something that has also come up, and something that not everyone knows, so I'm going to let you guys know now. A lot of times with basic mold maintenance, that might be something that is given a quick fix within the library, if it's not something that's so excessive that an actual mold remover crew needs to be doing. So that might get a quick fix. Here's something, if you've never been told this, you should know, and there are people who have never been told this, even though some other people think it's common knowledge. Do not mix your bleach with your ammonia. Both bleach and ammonia can be used to remedy mold temporarily while you're waiting for the mold issue to be addressed. Don't use them both. You are going to hurt people if you do that. They release toxic fumes that are even more toxic than the molds. So, stick with either bleach for a quick fix or ammonia for a quick fix while you're waiting for the professionals to come do their mold removal efforts. Water is a thing. Again, hopefully your water issues are being handled by your facilities maintenance people. I will say, however, that if you have leaks or drips or any sort of thing like that, handle that right away, because again, that's a mold issue. When things get damp, mold can become an issue. Mildew can also become an issue. And then also, when if you get a material that is turned in and the material is wet, if you have a way to sort of take care of that, then do so. Don't put a wet material near other materials. Don't reshelve it quite yet, because materials that are wet, they might also get molded, and then when you put molded materials next to other materials, those molds can spread. So if you have the ability to try to dry a material off before you reshelve it, that's probably your best practice. Okay. Plumbing, again, just make sure if you identify leaks or whatever, or pipes that need to be drained or anything like that, report those immediately to the facilities maintenance people for your college or for your county or for your school. Safety. This also now becomes a facilities concern, because we have things going on in the current days, such as what we unfortunately witnessed in Orlando just before we had ALA Annual. We all know about the mass shooting that occurred in Orlando. And things like active shooter training and things like that, those become security issues that become facilities issues, because one thing that your employees are going to need to know, all the exits. And one thing that has happened with active shooting scenarios is that everyone tries to go to the same exit. People are not aware of their exits, and so when an incident happens, everyone is headed to the familiar exit, and that's how people are not able to escape, and that's how we lose more lives than we could have lost otherwise, even though, of course, we're always hoping to not lose any lives. Okay? So you do want to have, again, ideally maybe you want to have drills, but it might not be realistic to say, okay, we're going to have drills at this, and that time, because people are short-staffed, and you just don't have time to do drills and that sort of thing. But if you as a manager can schedule, for instance, active shooting training and awareness for your staff, that's a good staff training to have. And you're going to want to make sure that your employees know the security people, have a very good relationship with the security people, whether you have in-house security or whether you have a lot of times, if you don't have actual security for the library, then a lot of times you will have the same officers for public libraries in particular that do the walkthroughs for the agency and that sort of thing. So you want to be on alert for that. Your employees need to have a rapport, basically, with your with your law enforcement or security people. Okay, and then the final thing that I'll mention, because I think I'm well over 20 minutes now, which I shouldn't be, so I apologize, is that you do want to look into ADA compliance. And so to read up on ADA, the American Disabilities Act, you can go to www.ada.gov, and there are some resources there. There is a book that I have not read, but I've heard good things about, and it is called I've written it here and now I can't find it. There we go. The ADA Library Kit. And this is something that can be purchased on Amazon. So I've not read it, I've not looked at it, but I've heard good things about it. And if you're very concerned with ADA compliance, as we all should be, then you might want to check that out. Okay? That's going to conclude personnel and facilities.